Everett Parrish Holloway was 44 years old, and he had spent the better part of 2 decades learning how to read silence. Not the comfortable kind, not the silence of a Saturday morning with coffee and the sound of someone you love breathing in the next room. The other kind, the kind that arrives slowly, like a crack in a foundation wall you keep painting over, because you tell yourself it isn't structural. You tell yourself it's cosmetic. You tell yourself it will hold. He had been telling himself that for 4 years. On a Wednesday evening in late November, sitting alone in his home office in Westmount, Montreal, with a legal envelope on the desk in front of him, Everett was running out of things to tell himself. The envelope had arrived 3 days earlier, hand-delivered by his own lawyer. The paperwork inside was complete, accurate, and 21 pages long. The only thing missing was his signature. What stopped him from signing it wasn't sentimentality. It wasn't hope, exactly. Hope had gone quiet in him a long time ago, the way a radio signal fades when you drive too far from the tower. What stopped him was something smaller and stranger, an email from his daughter. It had come in at 8:47 p.m. while he was uncapping the pen. "Dad, don't forget Sunday dinner. Mum's making her tourtière. Please come. 6. Don't be the last one there again." 23 words. No context, no warmth beyond what was simply assumed. The ordinary, slightly bossy communication of a 22-year-old who had long since stopped worrying whether her parents were happy and started only worrying whether they showed up. He set the pen down. He didn't know it yet, but by Sunday evening, he would overhear something that would make him want to sign those papers more than he ever had. And then, within the same hour, something else entirely. Something spoken quietly in a kitchen in NDG while the tourtière cooled that would make him fold those documents carefully back into the envelope and slide them into a drawer he would not open again. Stay with this, because what Everett Holloway was about to learn about his own marriage was something no lawyer, no mediator, and no well-meaning friend had thought to tell him. Montreal in November has a particular quality of gray to it, not the dramatic gray of a storm, the steady, unremarkable gray of a sky that has committed to its mood and intends to hold it for 6 weeks. The city carries on underneath it. The metro rumbling under St. Catherine, the outdoor terraces folded away until May. The particular energy of a place that knows winter is not a surprise but a reckoning, and prepares accordingly. Everett Holloway had grown up in this city. He knew it the way you know a language you dream in, not by thinking but by instinct. He could tell you which streets flooded first in the spring melt, which brasseries still served table d'hôte at a price that hadn't been updated since the 90s, which neighborhoods felt safe at 2 in the morning, and which did not. He was a forensic accountant at a mid-size firm on McGill College Avenue, 44 years old. The kind of professional who understood that most serious problems announce themselves in the margins, before they collapse the center. A variance here, an unexplained transfer there, a pattern of small decisions that individually looked reasonable and collectively looked like a disaster preparing itself. He was good at his work because he was patient with detail, and because he understood that people often left evidence not of what they intended, but of what they feared. His wife, Dominique Fournier Holloway, was 41. She had kept her maiden name professionally and hyphenated socially. A small but consistent declaration of the self she had brought into the marriage and intended to keep. She ran a textile design studio out of a brick loft in the Plateau Mont Royal. And the work she produced was the kind that made architects put down their phones and pay attention. Precise, textured, unexpectedly warm. Very much like the woman herself, in the years when Everett had paid enough attention to notice. They had met at a friend's birthday dinner 16 years ago, when he was still eating at his desk most evenings, and she was running her studio out of a second bedroom with extension cords taped across the floor. He had made a dry remark about the wine list that she alone found funny. He had thought, that's the one. For 11 of their 13 years of marriage, he still believed he'd been right. The last two had gone somewhere he couldn't name precisely, not dramatically, not with a scene, just quieter, and then quieter than that. The particular silence of two people who have stopped finding words for things they used to say without thinking. He had noticed it the way he noticed problems at work, gradually, then all at once. 3 years ago, the February he received the promotion that came with a corner office and a caseload that required him to be mentally elsewhere. For most of every evening, Dominique had congratulated him warmly. He had not noticed, until much later, that she had not told anyone else. Not her mother, not her friends. The promotion that had taken him 6 years to earn had been absorbed into their domestic life without a ripple. He had told himself she was simply not the type who broadcast other people's achievements. He had told himself a lot of things that year. What he had not let himself name, not until sitting in his home office with unsigned paperwork and a daughter's email on his screen, was that the distance between them had not arrived suddenly. It had been constructed incrementally, the way neglect constructs itself. Not with intention, with inattention, with all the small, invisible choices made by two people each waiting for the other to say something first. He turned off his desk lamp. He put on his coat. One more dinner, he thought. One more Sunday, and then he would decide. Because what Everett was about to overhear in his daughter's kitchen would reorder everything he thought he understood about the state of his marriage. About his wife. About how close they had both come to walking away from something neither of them had fully said goodbye to yet. Before the story continues, if you have ever worked quietly towards something you believed would be good for both of you, and discovered too late that the other person had been standing outside the frame the entire time, wondering if they were still included, this one is for you. His daughter, Camille, lived in NDG with her partner in a second-floor flat above a Portuguese bakery. The smell of custard tarts came up through the radiators on weekends. Camille had inherited her mother's eye for things. The flat was small but considered, every object placed with intention, mismatched chairs around a table that somehow looked like a decision rather than a compromise. When Everett arrived at 6:07, late, as noted, Dominique was already there. She was standing in the kitchen doorway in a dark green sweater he didn't recognize, talking to Camille's partner about something that made them both laugh. He had not seen her laugh like that in months. Light and unguarded, the way laughter sounds before it becomes something you perform for company. She looked up when he came in. The laughter didn't stop exactly, but it shifted register, became something held rather than something released. He noticed. He was trained to notice small discontinuities. Dinner was easy on the surface. Camille had her mother's instinct for hospitality, her father's dry wit, and no patience for tension, which meant she filled silences before they could settle. The tourtière was properly seasoned. There was a Côtes du Rhône that someone had chosen better than the occasion required. Everett answered questions about his cases, made the appropriate remarks, laughed in the right places. But he was watching. Dominique across the table was present the way a person is when they have made a decision to be present and it is costing them something. She smiled. She participated. And yet there was something careful about it. The posture of someone keeping a wound away from the edge of the table, not wanting to make a mess. At one point she glanced at him, and he looked back, and they both looked away at the same moment, with the practiced efficiency of two people who have learned to avoid accidental contact. He excused himself after the main course, the way men of his particular disposition do when they need a moment. Bathroom, just a minute, and walked down the narrow hall past Camille's bookshelf and the gallery of framed photographs she'd been assembling since she moved in. He stopped at one. It was a photograph from their 15th anniversary. 3 years ago, he and Dominique on the terrace of a hotel in Quebec City, the St. Lawrence behind them going silver in the evening light. They were not looking at the camera. They were looking at each other. He did not remember who had taken it. He did not remember the moment feeling as easy as it looked. The bathroom was at the end of the hall. He was reaching for the door when he heard Dominique's voice from the kitchen. He stopped. A man with his training does not linger in hallways listening to private conversations. He knew that even as he stood there, but then he registered the tone, not the composed conversational voice his wife used in company. A different register, lower. The kind of voice that only emerges when someone believes they are not being heard. Camille was speaking first, quiet and careful, the way their daughter spoke when she was trying not to make something worse. "Mom, talk to me. You've been somewhere else all evening." Then Dominique. He has replayed those next 2 minutes more times than he can accurately account for. The way a forensic accountant replays an anomalous entry. Not because he doubts what he heard, but because understanding it fully requires examining it from more than one angle. "Your father," Dominique said, her voice fraying at the edges in a way he had not heard in years, "built a life for us without ever asking me what kind of life I wanted to live in." He put his hand against the wall. "And the worst part," she continued, and her voice broke slightly, just once, before she steadied it. "The worst part is that he did it out of love. I'm certain of that. I am absolutely certain of that, and I don't know what to do with that. Because how do you grieve something that was given with the best intentions?" Camille said something too low for him to hear. Dominique's reply came quieter. "There's a man at my professional association, Bernard. He told me 3 months ago that I was remarkable and that remarkable women don't disappear into marriages. And I was so far gone that I stood there and let him say it. Twice." A pause. "I didn't do anything, I want you to know that. But I listened, and the second time, I thought about it longer before I walked away. That's what scares me most. Not him, me." Everett stood in the hallway for what felt like a long time. A man named Bernard. The name registered calmly, the way everything registered with him, filed precisely, without drama for later consideration. What occupied him in that moment was something older and more complicated than jealousy. It was the slow, clarifying grief of a man who realizes he has been so focused on the architecture of a life that he had forgotten to consult the person who was meant to live inside it with him. He had drawn the plans in his own head. He had worked toward them with his characteristic patience and precision, and he had never once spread them out on a table and said, "Here's what I'm building. Does this look like home to you?" He walked back to the dining room, sat down, poured himself a glass of water, and did not drink it. 20 minutes later, he made a reasonable excuse about an early case preparation. Dominique said goodnight to Camille without meeting his eyes. They drove back across the city in the particular silence of two people with too much to say and no available language for it yet. The highway was quiet. The streetlights on Décarie blurred amber through the windshield. Everett kept his eyes on the road and thought, with his characteristic methodical attention, about ledgers, about the way a financial record tells you not what happened, but what people valued enough to account for. He thought about all the things he had accounted for over the past 4 years and all the things he had let go unrecorded. When they got home, Dominique went directly upstairs. He sat at his desk. He picked up the legal envelope and held it in both hands for a long time. He set it down. "Not yet," he said to no one. And then, because Everett Holloway was a man who understood that the most important problems are never solved by waiting for better conditions, he stood up. He walked to the bottom of the stairs. And he did the hardest thing he had done in 4 years, which was to be the first one to say something. He knocked on the bedroom door, twice. Steady. There was a pause. The particular pause of someone deciding whether to answer in the way they have always answered, or differently. The door opened. Dominique stood in the threshold in reading glasses, and the old cardigan she wore, when she wasn't expecting company, which told him more than she knew about the shape of the evening she had been having. Her expression was not afraid, not hopeful, it was guarded, in the way of someone who has learned that the safest position is the one that commits to nothing. "Can I come in?" he said. I need to tell you something, and I think it should probably be tonight." She stepped back. He came in and sat on the edge of the chair by the window, her chair, the one she read in, which felt significant in a way he couldn't fully articulate. He kept a deliberate distance. Hands folded, elbows on knees, eyes on the floor for a moment, then on her. The room was quiet. The street below was quiet. Outside, Montreal was doing what it always does in November, holding itself together against conditions it has encountered before and will encounter again. "I had papers on my desk," he said. "A legal envelope. I had them drafted 3 weeks ago." She didn't speak. "I want you to know that before I tell you the rest of what I came to say. Because it matters. Because I don't want to have this conversation while that's still something I'm keeping from you." He watched something move across her face, not collapse, more like the specific stillness of a person recalibrating in real time. "I heard you in the kitchen tonight," he said. "I wasn't trying to listen. The door was open, and I heard, and I stood there because what I heard made me unable to move." A long silence. "Everett." Her voice was barely above a breath. "I need to tell you something first," he said. "Before you say anything, I have been building a version of our life that I never described to you. I just built it. I made decisions I believed were right for us, and I put them in place, and I assumed you could see the shape of what I was doing, and that you understood it the way I did. And what you said tonight made me understand that you couldn't see any of it from where you were standing, because I never showed you the plans." The careful architecture of composure he had been maintaining for 4 years developed its first visible crack. Not a collapse, more like a joint finally releasing pressure it had been holding beyond its design tolerance. "That's on me," he said. "That's entirely on me." She sat down on the edge of the bed. She took off her glasses and held them. They looked at each other across the room, two people who had been building a wall from opposite sides, each one convinced they were building toward the other, neither one checking. "I thought you had decided," she said finally. "I thought you had looked at us and concluded we had run our course and were just managing the timeline." "Why would you think that?" "Because you went so quiet. You stopped asking me things. You stopped telling me things. I tried to be patient. I thought you needed space to work. And then one morning, I woke up and realized I had been patient for 2 years and nothing had changed. And I didn't know how to tell you that, because you didn't seem to notice I was still in the room." He sat with that for a moment, the specific weight of it. "I thought I was being respectful," he said. "I thought if you needed something you would say so. I thought, you thought I was like a case file," she said, not cruelly. "That if something was wrong, the evidence would surface." He exhaled slowly. That was exactly and precisely true, and the accuracy of it made him feel the way he felt when a number he had been chasing through a spreadsheet for weeks finally resolved into something undeniable. Not relief, recognition. "I don't want to sign those papers," he said. "I know." "No. I want you to know that I am telling you I don't want to. Not because I'm asking you what you want, first and adjusting. I'm telling you first, because I'm done managing things in my own head without telling you." She was quiet for a moment, looking at him the old way, the way she used to look when she was deciding whether to believe something and taking her time about it. "Then what do you want?" she asked. "I want us to actually talk, not to be good at managing the house and the schedule and the dinners. I want to know what you wanted from this life that you don't have. And I want to tell you about the things I've been doing and why. I want there to be plans we've both seen." "That sounds very sensible," she said. "I know. I'm trying not to be sensible about it. I'm trying to be honest about it." Something shifted in her expression. Not the dramatic shift of a scene, the smaller, quieter shift of a person deciding to try. "Okay," she said. They talked until past midnight. Not about the marriage in the abstract. About specific things. About the year he had the difficult caseload, and she had the studio expansion, and they had passed each other for 8 months like ships at adjacent berths, each too busy managing their own cargo to signal across the water. About the anniversary dinner, 3 years ago when she had waited for him to mention what the evening meant, and he had assumed she knew, and they had eaten very good food in very careful silence and driven home without either of them saying the thing. About her father's death 2 winters ago, when Everett had shown up at her family's home on Eel Bizzard the night he got the call, and sat beside her on the old sectional for 3 hours and said almost nothing, because he had not known what to say and had decided that presence was what he could offer. He had assumed it had registered as insufficient. She had been carrying it as one of the only moments in those 2 years that had felt like him, really him. And she had never told him, because telling him would have required explaining how desperate she had been for it. They did not resolve everything that night. That was not the kind of problem with a single session resolution, and both of them were too honest and too experienced to pretend otherwise. But at 2 in the morning, when Everett finally stood to leave the room, Dominique caught his hand. Just briefly. The kind of contact that says, I haven't decided everything yet, but I haven't closed the door either. He held it for a moment, then let go. 3 days later, they sat together in the office of a therapist in Outremont, a converted Victorian on a street lined with bare maples, the kind of building that looked like it had been designed to hold difficult conversations at a respectful distance from the rest of the city. Dr. Felix Renaud was 53. With the particular patience of someone who had heard enough articulate half-truths to recognize them as a defensive structure rather than communication, and who knew that the most useful thing was usually to wait. His office had good light and no ambient noise, and a pair of low-backed chairs positioned so that 2 people could sit near each other without facing each other directly, which he had found, over many years, was sometimes the arrangement under which people said truest things. He opened simply, the way good practitioners do. What do you each believe went wrong? Everett went first. He described it the way he described professional findings, clearly, without editorializing. The distance, the mutual silence, the assumption on his part that things unsaid were understood. The failure of a man accustomed to reading other people's hidden information to notice the hidden information in his own home. Dr. Renaud wrote something down. Dominique was quiet for longer. Then she said, There's something I haven't told him yet. There's a man, Bernard Lacasse. He's on the board of my professional association. Over the last several months, he's been persistent in a way that I didn't handle as decisively as I should have. She looked at Everett directly. I didn't pursue anything, I need you to know that. But I want you to know what I was actually feeling in those moments, because I think you deserve the honest version, not the cleaned-up one. She described it plainly. A man who had identified her at a moment of vulnerability and offered her the specific thing she was not receiving at home. The feeling of being seen, of being chosen, of being considered remarkable in the specific and personal way that feels different from professional acknowledgement. I was so low, she said, that someone I'm not remotely interested in managed to be meaningful to me for about 45 seconds twice. That's what I can't forgive myself for. Not him. The 45 seconds. Everett looked at his hands. He was a man who had spent his career reading the emotional subtext of numbers, the fear, the ambition, the desperation encoded in financial behavior. He understood, with more clarity than he could have managed 4 years ago, that what Dominique was describing was not infidelity. It was a thermometer reading, an account of exactly how depleted the balance had become. Did any part of you want to respond? He asked, quietly, without accusation. I wanted someone to choose me, she said. Not him specifically, that specific feeling. And that scared me enough that I'm sitting here. That's fair, he said. I owe you a lot of the accounting for that. Dr. Renaud let that settle before he spoke. What I'm hearing from both of you is a pattern that appears in marriages that are in fact quite strong in structure but have experienced a communication failure at the level of emotional ledger keeping. Each of you was depositing effort into the relationship, and neither of you was making those deposits visible to the other. The account felt empty from the inside even when contributions were being made, because they weren't being narrated. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Then Everett reached into his jacket and took out his phone. He found an email thread, formal header, the name of his firm's managing partner, and turned the screen so Dominique could see it. Her eyes moved down the page, then stopped. "You were offered a senior partnership," she said slowly, "2 months ago. 8 years in the making," he confirmed. "The role required me to take on the Toronto and Vancouver portfolios. Minimum 2 weeks travel per month for the first 2 years, possibly longer during restructuring." She looked up at him. His reply to the offer was visible in the thread, respectful, unambiguous, dated 6 weeks prior. "We were already not talking," he said. "I wasn't going to test what we had left with me gone half the month." Dominique stared at him. The expression that crossed her face was not simple. It was the expression of a person receiving information that does not fit the existing framework and is consequently forced to rebuild the framework around it. "You turned that down," she said, "without telling me. I didn't want you to feel responsible for the decision. I made the one I could live with. But it was also my decision to be part of," she said, and her voice, unlike his, held something, not anger, but a complicated grief. "That's the same problem, Everett, a different form of the same problem. You made a sacrifice for me without giving me the chance to make it with you." He sat with that. It was precise and it was accurate, and it landed the way accurate things land. Without drama, with weight. "Yes," he said. "That's right, Doctor." Renaud observed this exchange with the particular attention of someone watching two people discover the shape of their own pattern in real time, and did not interrupt it. Then Dominique's phone buzzed on the armrest. She glanced at it, and her expression changed in the specific way of a person who recognizes a number they were not expecting and are not pleased to see. She picked it up, read it, and sat very still. Then she turned it and held it toward Everett without speaking. The message was from Bernard Lacasse, "Thinking of you. Hope you're reconsidering your options. Some doors don't stay open." Everett read it once. Read it again with the same careful attention he gave to documents requiring a second pass. Set the phone on the cushion between them. And then, to the mild surprise of the room and somewhat to his own, he smiled. Not a brittle smile. Not a performance. The genuine, unforced smile of a man who has arrived somewhere solid and finds that the view from there is largely uncomplicated. He placed his hand briefly on Dominique's arm. "That's not a ledger I'm competing in," he said. "I've never been good at that kind of accounting. I'm only good at the kind where the numbers actually mean something." He looked at her steadily. "And the numbers in ours mean something. I just forgot to read them out loud." She closed her eyes. A single tear moved down one side of her face. She didn't wipe it away. "Dr. Renaud said quietly, I think what's become clear today is that you have both been keeping the same books without showing each other the entries. The therapeutic work from here is learning to do that out loud in real time. The raw material is clearly there. What's been missing is the narration." They walked out into a cold Outremont afternoon, the kind where the November light comes in low and flat and makes the bare trees look like an architectural drawing. All structure, no ornament. They didn't touch on the sidewalk. It was too early for easy. But they walked at a pace that matched, which felt like something. In the car, Dominique said, "He's not going to stop." Everett started the engine. "No, probably not immediately. Does that worry you?" He considered this in the way he considered things, genuinely, without the performance of certainty. "No," he said, "it doesn't." The following Friday, Dominique had her professional association's annual recognition dinner at a hotel in the Vieux-Port, the kind of event where the city's design and architecture community assembled in the main ballroom to acknowledge each other's work and drink better wine than the occasion technically required. Everett came. This was not customary. He had not attended one of her professional events in 2 years, and she had stopped asking. After the third time, it became easier not to. When he appeared at the flat at 6:30 in his good suit, Dominique looked at him for a moment with the expression of a woman recalibrating her expectations in real time. "You're coming," she said, "if that's all right." It was. The ballroom was warm and well lit, the conversation ambient and familiar in the way of professional communities that have known each other long enough to have shared histories and running jokes, and the particular ease of people who compete with each other in a domain they also love. Dominique was known here. She moved through the room with the natural ease of someone in her element. Her laughter genuine, her conversations substantive, her presence the kind that made people turn toward it. Everett watched her from a moderate distance and thought about the photograph on Camille's wall. He thought about how much of the woman he was watching had been in the same house as him for 4 years, and he had not, somehow, been watching. He was in conversation with an architect from Westmount when he saw Bernard Lacasse arrive. He recognized the type without difficulty. A man in his mid-50s with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to being the most interesting person in a room he hasn't earned yet. The kind of man who mistakes a woman's professional confidence for an opening and a woman's unhappiness for an invitation. Everett watched him without urgency. At 9:20, Lacasse made his way across the room toward Dominique. The approach was practiced, the right pace, the right angle, calculated to suggest casualness while communicating intention. Everett, from across the room, set his glass down. He did not cross the floor. He did not move toward them. He watched. Dominique saw Lacasse coming. Her posture didn't change dramatically, but it settled. The way a person settles when they have thought about a moment in advance and arrived at it already decided. She turned to face him squarely, with the particular composure of a woman who has done her accounting and knows exactly what the balance reads. She said something. Everett was too far away to hear it, but he saw the shape of it. Short, clear, final. No drama, no performance. Just the tone of a person closing a file. He saw Lacasse's practiced ease develop a brief fault line before the recovery came. He saw the recovery for what it was, the smoothing over of a man who had encountered something he genuinely hadn't prepared for. He watched him move toward the bar. Everett set his glass down and felt something he could only describe as the professional satisfaction of watching a structure behave exactly as its engineering predicted it would. He crossed the room and found Dominique by the windows. She was looking out at the river, the St. Lawrence in November, going dark and wide beyond the glass. "He won't be back," she said without turning. "No," he agreed. "I don't think he will." They stood there for a moment. The ballroom moved behind them. "Thank you for being here tonight," she said. "Thank you for letting me come." She glanced at him sideways, the trace of a smile. "You could have asked sooner." "I could have done a lot of things sooner," he said. The smile widened slightly. Not all the way, but in the right direction. 5 months later, on a Saturday morning in late April, Everett and Dominique sat at the kitchen table of the house in Westmount with a set of architectural drawings spread out between them. Not legal documents. Blueprints. The renovation they had been discussing. In the way couples discuss things they don't actually believe will happen. For 6 years. The back addition. The proper home office for Dominique on the north side, where the light looked great for working with textiles. The covered porch they had never gotten around to. The kitchen island large enough to actually use. They had made an appointment with an architect in February. They had gone together and come back with rough plans, and Dominique had sat at that same table that evening with her own pencil making adjustments. "This window needs to be higher. This wall can move. I want to see the garden from the desk." And Everett had watched her and thought, "There she is. That's who I married. That's who I forgot to tell I was still building toward." The 5 months between the dinner in NDG and this Saturday morning had not been easy. Healing in the experience of both of them turned out not to resemble the narrative arc of a film, the single breakthrough followed by resolution. It resembled, rather, the gradual correction of a structural problem. methodical, requiring repeated attention, occasionally requiring you to go back and look at something you thought you had addressed and address it again more thoroughly. They had continued with Dr. Renaud, weekly, then bi-weekly, as the conversations became less things they needed help navigating, and more things they could navigate together and then debrief. They had learned, and this had required real effort for both of them, to narrate their internal states before the silence could calcify around them, to say the thing while it was still a thing that could be said. Dominique had started leaving him notes, nothing elaborate. Proud of you for the Lavoie case. I know it was hard. Made too much soup. Come home by 7 if you can. That thing you said to Camille at dinner, she needed to hear it. Good call. He had kept all of them in a small dish on his desk, replacing the legal envelope that no longer lived there. Everett had started saying things out loud. The partnership he had turned down. He had sat down with Dominique and told her the full accounting of that decision. Every factor. She had been quiet for a long time afterward, and then had said that she wished he had told her, and then had said that she understood why he hadn't, and then had said that she was glad he had told her now. All three of those things were true simultaneously, which was why the conversation had taken an hour and a half, and why it had mattered. He had told her that the dinners she made on Friday evenings, the ones she had quietly, pointedly made during the worst of the years, had mattered to him. Every one of them. He had simply been too inside his own head to say so. She had looked at him with an expression that was not easily catalogued and said, I almost stopped. I know, he said. I'm glad you didn't. I almost did, she said again, which was not redundant. It was lay scafus of the same truth, the layer beneath the statement. On this particular Saturday, Camille came by mid-morning to look at the drawings. She stood at the edge of the table, reading the plans with her mother's eye for spatial logic, making small remarks. That hallway's going to be dark. What about a skylight? Can you do a proper mudroom for the winter gear? While her parents sat on opposite sides of the table, and occasionally both answered at once, and occasionally looked at each other, and occasionally did not say anything because there was nothing that needed to be said. Camille noticed. She had her father's habit of noticing. She did not say anything about it, which was its own kind of acknowledgement. That evening, after Camille had gone home, and the drawings were rolled back up, and Dominique had made tea, and Everett had found the good shortbread from the tin in the back of the cupboard, they sat in the kitchen as the November light in April, which was different from November, warmer and more persuadable, came through the window above the sink. Dominique said, without preamble, he texted again last week. Everett looked up. Lacasse, she said. Third time since the dinner. He waited. She picked up her phone from the table, unlocked it, and held it toward him. The screen showed a blocked contact, a short thread ending abruptly, with no replies on her side. I didn't answer any of them, she said. And the last one I just blocked. I didn't ask you what to do first. I just did it. I wanted you to know. He looked at the screen for a moment, set the phone down, looked at her. Thank you for telling me, he said. And then, because he was becoming slightly better at saying what he actually meant, not for blocking him, though I appreciate that too. For telling me. You could have handled it and not mentioned it, and I wouldn't have known. I know, she said. That's why I told you. They looked at each other across the kitchen table. The architectural drawings were in the next room. The tea was too hot to drink yet. Outside, the street was quiet with the specific quiet of a weekend evening in a neighborhood where people have been there long enough to have stopped needing to prove it. What had changed between them was not easily visible from the outside. It would have required, for any observer, the patience and attention of someone trained to notice the things other people decide not to look at. A forensic level of attention to the quality of silence versus the quality of silence. The way two people can sit at a table and have the distance between them be either a gap or a space. This was a space. Next spring, Dominique said, turning back to her tea, when the edition is finished, I want to have a dinner. A proper one. Our people. How many is our people? 16. Maybe 18. He considered this. The new kitchen island fits 14, then I'll get a folding table. A folding table, he said. Yes, in the renovation we just commissioned. Everett, she said, some problems cannot be solved in advance. They have to be improvised on the day. He looked at her. She was entirely serious and also, underneath the seriousness, smiling. He said, okay, and then he said, 16, and she said, 18. And the argument about the folding table went on for 20 minutes, which was the longest and most enjoyable disagreement they'd had in 4 years, and which neither of them was in any particular hurry to resolve.